Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck, a human design experiment podcast. I am your host, Candy Barone, and I have to tell you, I am super excited about my guest who I'm about to introduce to you. She is someone that when I say the word badass, wow, does she just stand in that space and is just a powerhouse in her own right. But before I introduce you to her, let me remind you that this is our space to get raw, real, and gritty. And we are having the conversations that matter. We are having the conversations that allow us to connect, to create change, and to raise the level of consciousness. So, with that, let me introduce you to my brilliant, badass, and amazing guest, the brilliant Joyce Marter. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Candy. I'm blushing from your kind introduction. You're so sweet. It's such an honor to be with you. I can't wait to dig in.
Oh, I am so excited. And so, just so y'all know why I love this woman, not to mention the fact that being in her energy is just delicious. She and I met, about a year and a half ago through the Dames. And many of you have heard me talk about that before. It is this incredible, eclectic, just really deep, rich community of high powered, high performing women who are really creating massive impact and change. And so the minute Joyce and I connected, there was just this like love fest between us. And so just it's super delicious to be in her energy. And I'm going to also share that she is a fellow 6-2 emotional manifesting generator. So, there's always that magic as well at play. And we'll talk a little bit about that in some things. But let me tell you a little bit about Joyce. Joyce is a licensed psychotherapist, entrepreneur, and globally recognized mental health thought leader. She founded, scaled, and successfully sold a multi-million-dollar mental health company and contributes to Psychology Today, Money Geek, and other leading platforms. Her book, The Financial Mindset Fixed, which I have, has been published in 4 languages and has earned 8 book awards. It is phenomenal. She is a sought after expert on the psychology of money and holistic success. Joyce has been featured on CNN, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, MTV, reaching 1.2 billion people annually. She is no joke, y'all. She's a keynote speaker, corporate trainer, and consultant, and currently serves as the board of directors for the National Speakers Association. Again, I am thrilled to have you here. And I think in light of what you put into the world, we're going to have a really, and I'm going to use the pun intentionally, rich conversation about money, success, and how we are on a pathway. And so I think I'm going to start there. I'm just going to jump in right in the middle of a conversation. I want to jump in. The world is changing, and we are shifting our paradigm around success and money and leadership. And so I would like to, from your perspective, have you share how you see that unfolding.
Oh my goodness, that's a big and very important question. Obviously, we are in a time of tremendous change, and we've been dealing with chronic global uncertainty and change for several years, and it continues. I feel like what we're living in right now, I call it the great exhaustion,
Mm.
that we're just burnt out, we're overwhelmed, we're stressed out. And of course, I care very deeply about the mental health implications for all of us and encourage each of us to be mindful about that. And when we are living during these times of economic uncertainty, it's really common for us to have a scarcity mindset when it comes to money. And when there's scarcity, I know for myself, and I see it in my clients and those that I serve, imposter syndrome seems to pop up even more and other aspects of ego. And so perhaps now more than ever, the world needs us to shine our light authentically and to believe in ourselves and embrace our worth and continue to put ourselves out in the world and shine our lights brightly and to welcome the financial prosperity that we each we have an innate deserving to be in the flow of love and life and health and money.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to remember that, especially now.
Yeah, I love what you just said. And like I said, we're going to jump in deep because I already knew based on things we've talked about. And there's so much I want to break down in what you just said. And the first piece I think is really around the fact that I love that you're calling, well, I don't love because let's call it what it is. I acknowledge the fact that you are calling this a state of exhaustion, like we're in this very chronic state of exhaustion. I call there's other words I use. There's this wobble, there's uncertainty, there's all these things. I'm curious as we talk about mental health because I think it's a conversation that people are starting to finally lean into. But I would offer and I would love to see and hear your perspective on this, especially being that this is your wheelhouse and your expertise. Is I feel we have a mental health epidemic right now. I feel like mental health has essentially become the new cancer. And so I am wondering with the tremendous exhaustion we are undergoing individually and collectively, and this chronic uncertainty and chaos and noise that's going on around us. How is that impacting mental health? And are we living in a mental health crisis right now?
Absolutely, 100%. We were already in a mental health epidemic prior to the pandemic, and that added fuel to the fire. And even though we're on the other side of the pandemic, we've been dealing with war, political divide, economic uncertainty, and the rise of AI, which is, causing us to work differently, to live differently, and that requires energy and change. And if there's anything that I've learned as a therapist, it's that times of transition are stressful and they can either trigger or exacerbate existing mental health conditions. I fully believe that each of us has mental health just like we have physical health. And that mental health, like physical health, is on a continuum between wellness and disease or disorder. And depending on the day, the week, the month, or the season of our life, we might fall in different places on that mental health continuum. And that is completely normal. It is not our fault. It is not a weakness. Does not mean that we're crazy. Our mental health is a normal response to our genetic makeup. We are biologically predispositioned to respond to stress differently, and some of us respond with depression or anxiety, like myself, or addiction or eating disordered behaviors. And so during times like this, it's also, we're living in a collective trauma. And sometimes I think people think that traumas are something that only war veterans or victims of a natural disaster or horrible assault experience, but we each have our own personal trauma history. If you've had a breakup or a divorce or an accident or an injury or a financial trauma, like a bankruptcy or a short sale or a period of unemployment or unexpected health expenses. And so I think many of us are living with acute trauma symptoms, acute stress symptoms. For many people, PTSD is getting triggered where we may have had traumas that we thought we resolved, and there suddenly those symptoms are creeping up again. And so my call to action is to ask everyone who's listening to this to wrap yourself with loving self-compassion and honor your emotions and your level of depletion or exhaustion or burnout, and identify what it is that you need. Do you need more self-care, more self-love, more support and community like we have in the Dames? And, I think seeing a therapist should be like seeing the dentist or the doctor in a routine and preventative form of healthcare. When I started in graduate school at Northwestern, I first of all thought that my admission was a mistake because my self-esteem was so low. I had total imposter syndrome when I arrived. And I had such social anxiety that my voice shook when I was called on in class and I dreaded it. And today I'm a public speaker only because the professors recommended that we all seek our own personal therapy. And for me, that was transformational, to have a safe space to explore my family of origin and earlier life experiences and honor how they shaped and molded me, to understand that I live with an anxiety disorder or maybe even a few, and to learn tools to manage that and to transcend it. So we need to honor our mental health and take care of it, just like we do if we were diabetic or had some physical health condition.
Yeah. And oh, I have so many questions I want to pose at you because just that brings up so much. And one of the things, and for those of you that know, we talk about human design, right? And so I want to kind of connect this a little bit because this is one of the reasons why I think, having this conversation with Joyce right now and talking about this is one of the things we find when we look at someone's human design is there are different traumas. There are different places imposter syndrome lives. There are different, and so for example, you have a format channel, Gate 3060, that's defined in your chart, and I have the other two. So even the way depression and anxiety shows up, it looks different. And so one of the things I would like to explore a little bit more with you, because I think there's a couple things. One, I think there's an opportunity to unravel or unwind or unpack. I guess that's a better word. Unpack the stigma around mental health and the labels that get assigned to mental health that make us feel like we're broken or something's wrong. First of all, I think that needs to be unpacked. And then the other piece is the recognition around, to what you just said, we all have stuff. We all have, and I do think there's also this stigma or this myth that PTSD is only for a wounded war soldier. It's oftentimes I've found, and what I see even in people's human design, and I've experienced for myself, anxiety and addiction. Mine's been really an addiction in earlier aspects of my life, has been micro traumas more than even, not to say there hasn't been, there has been some tremendous trauma in my past background, but that oftentimes it's the micro traumas sometimes that are as damaging. I don't even know if I'm using the right language here, but are as impactful as the big thing that might have happened at one time. And so I'd love to unpack both sides of that a little bit with you because I think this isn't a conversation that people are having enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I didn't mention was that I was really worried in graduate school that my professors were going to see that I had this anxiety disorder and that they'd say, you can't be a therapist because you have your own mental health issues. Well, if they said that, there'd be no therapists because we all have mental health issues as part of the human condition. And we don't expect our doctors and nurses and physicians to have a perfect bill of health. That's asinine. And so we need to reframe the way that we think about mental health as well. And that continuum that I mentioned is between being in crisis and thriving. And so over the last couple of years, I keynote talk around the country, across the industry. Most of us have fallen in that surviving or struggling category. And now there's a little bit more of a smattering of people excelling and some fewer in crisis. But again, that can change as the world changes or as different things happen in our lives. But the stigma around mental health, that can come from our families, our cultures, our religious beliefs, where we live in the country. There's a big difference in living in South Dakota talking about mental health and living in New York City, for example. And so we need to learn that words matter and to use compassionate language around mental health and to become informed and to become advocates and to promote care. I have my kids in therapy. I mean, they're grown now, they're still in therapy. It's just part of wellness, like having a personal trainer. So those are some things that I think are really, really important. And yes, you're right. With regard to trauma, there are big T traumas and there are little T traumas, like those micro traumas, and it's cumulative.
Mm.
So we want to honor all of that and recognize the feelings, the personality characteristics that have been carved, through those experiences. And I believe in the recovery and resiliency of the human spirit. It's why I do what I do. And I often find that individuals who've experienced significant levels of trauma and who have worked their best to work through them, to transcend them, are some of the most wise and powerful people that I've met. And so I think now is a time for us really to step into our hearts and have more compassion for ourselves and others and into our power. Because with everything going on in the world, I think many of us are feeling disempowered and frustrated. And when we can step into what we can control and take action, we're going to feel better and we're going to be change agents in the world.
Yeah. So I love that. And I'm feeling called to be a bit flippant in my next question because I can hear resistance from some of the people I know are in this community. I know it because it was me 10, 15 years ago before I started really doing the work on that's great. And how am I supposed to take my power back? How am I supposed to tap into emotions when my entire life, and I think about even coming from a corporate background, right? I had 20 years in corporate, and I think about how vulnerability, how emotion, and there's still a huge stigma around that being a weakness. And that if you offer, and I always thought it was interesting in corporate how the only emotion you were allowed to have was being pissed off because that was the collective catch-all. And it's all right to be irritated and pissed off, even if underneath the actual emotion was I'm scared, I'm feeling anxious, I feel like I'm not being seen, I'm feeling exposed or vulnerable. You didn't say that, you just said I'm pissed, right? Like it was the collect all cop out. How does one who may be feeling a tremendous amount of resistance or truthfully maybe 40, 50 years old and has never ever learned how to fully acknowledge what an emotion is to start that pathway to reclaim personal power back?
Well, my biggest recommendation would be to establish a daily mindfulness strategy or practice. So, mindfulness obviously has been around for thousands of years and is rooted in the concepts of being present. And, a lot of us spend tremendous energy worrying about the uncertainty of the future or second guessing the past. And when we practice mindfulness, like meditation, deep breathing, being in nature, yoga, which is meditation with movement, we start to connect with our bodies in a different way and detach from our egos and our mind's understanding of ourselves. So, as you're talking about the old kind of corporate model of stuffing emotions or putting them all in the angry bucket, when we practice mindfulness, we can begin to detach from our intellect and connect with our heart and our gut and the intuitive wisdom of our body. And feelings are waves of emotion that we hold in the body. And if we don't process them, they manifest as sickness. And so, anger, resentment is hardened anger. When we hold on to this, and the way I like to think about it is if you've ever had a massage and the massage therapist is working on a certain area, I find that sometimes my mind goes to a certain place and we're holding old wounds and hurts in our bodies. And so when we have a mindfulness practice, we can clear that energy and we can become more self-aware. So rather than using our defense mechanisms like denial, rationalization, intellectualization, we can just honor what we're experiencing as truth and without judgment and learn skills. For me, meditation and yoga have been transformative because they're resilience practices. And, you learn the skills to be able to breathe through difficulty and challenges and know that they will pass. And on the other end, you're going to be stronger, more balanced, more flexible, and more resilient. So, whether it's a mindfulness practice or talking to a therapist or counselor like myself, or it's journaling or some other self help program, anything that's going to turn your eyes inward and teach you how to be really vulnerable and honest with yourself. That's the prerequisite to having intimacy in your life and having success in your life is really having a deep and solid understanding of who you are without judgment and honoring your strengths, your areas of needed growth. And when we do that, we step into our power. So we can learn how to detach from what's going on in the world and facilitate equanimity and the empowerment, the desire to take action and be a force of good in the world.
Yeah. I love that because all of that, first of all, can I just say your definition for yoga hit me on a level because I think about my own resistance to meditation and yoga, and sometimes as a Manny Gen trying to slow down and do the things, but that ability to create meditation in motion, because I talk sometimes around my best meditations are when I'm moving. It's in nature, it's on a walk. I don't always do well. Now there is an opportunity for me to slow down and sit as well in that, but I really love that definition. I'm curious because this leads me to thinking about as we're ushering in a new consciousness, as we are shifting. And I think there's a lot of resistance in that, even right now, as things are kind of imploding and systems are breaking down. And there are people that I call this era right now the wobble. We've got one foot steeped in old ways of doing things and one that started propelling us forward. When you think about our ability to move as humanity into our next evolution, when you think about a new consciousness coming in, how then do you redefine success, wealth, leadership? Like, what does that start to transform? Assuming, and maybe I shouldn't say assuming, maybe I should just leave that wide open, that we're taking that opportunity to do that self inventory, that work for ourselves. What does that start to transform and look like in your eyes?
It's a ripple effect of consciousness. So when we do the work, then we're creating systemic change in every system, relationship, or community that we're in. And I believe that, we're into the age of Aquarius and an age where my personal belief is that the divine feminine is coming forward and that some old frameworks are coming forth in some interesting ways. And I think it's part of a process to unveil this new way of being, of working and living, which I believe is all about flow, which is, you think about the breath, you think about love, you think about money, it's all, or energy, it all has flow. And we've been out of balance. And so I think we're coming into a new, more balanced definition of success that's holistic. It's not just about money, it's about our physical health, our mental health, our connections to others, about our, participations in our community and the impact that we make on others. And so I'm a big believer. I mean, as an entrepreneur, a mompreneur, I have always had the mindset of having work-life integration and cultivating that for myself and for the people that work with me and for my loved ones and my clients. And that's not an easy thing to develop and cultivate, and it requires self-love and it requires an abundant mindset that that's possible. And so I do think, part of my story is that I grew up with scarcity mindset, financial anxiety, kind of low self-esteem, ended up in cash flow hell, was facing a business bankruptcy, dealing with insomnia and panic attacks. And I think one of my biggest lessons was learning to ask for help and support, and help came out of the woodwork. And once I had a piece of humble pie and was able to practice humility and ask for help, my whole life changed and my relationship with money changed. And I manifested abundance. I was able to sell this business that was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt at one point, 7 years later, for a seven-figure multiple and an eight-figure exit. And so I do think that's part of when we work on our consciousness, we vibrate at a different level. We know we're deserving of more, and our life transforms. And I'm not sharing those numbers with you to brag. I'm sharing them because if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's about tapping into that higher level, higher vibration of what's available.
Yeah, and I think it's important sometimes that we shine a light on that. I think also as women, when you talk about, and I love everything about that because there is a divine feminine coming in. There's also a very individualized energy that says, when I take care of me, all is taken care of. It's not this need to martyr ourselves. No, the space around always over delivering for everyone else and carrying everyone else when we haven't given anything back to ourselves. And I think about even people that have this scarcity mindset that says, if I'm a spiritual being, I can't be wealthy. When we don't understand that those two things, because we live in a world that operates in money, that if we don't have resources, we can't do and create the impact or the change that we want in the world because it requires resources. One of the things I think is moving, though, in this shift in consciousness is one, we're bringing in this very beautiful divine feminine. It's kind of hard to see it right now as we've got a lot of imbalanced masculine going on. There's also a divine masculine that's coming in as well because we need that balance. And I like your word holistic because when we talk about it, especially even looking at kind of the collective human design, we talk about redefining success from a place of well-being, not from a materialistic wealth, but from a wealth that starts and is grounded in a space of my own well-being and then the well-being that I offer to others. And one of the things, I don't know, maybe this is just me thinking about this, I feel like on some level, we're coming back into the energy of tribes where each of us had in those tribes, each person had a specific role of what they contributed to the whole, that there were these energetic trades, and wealth became a way of utilizing and sharing resources so that all could thrive. Because I think there's also some work to be done collectively, especially in the Western Hemisphere where we live in the most entitled energy I've ever seen, is to realize that when we think there are scarce resources, we create more scarcity versus abundance breeds abundance. So when we are in a space to say, I can offer, and I've filled, and I like to tell people that the new mantra, I think, going into the new era is I no longer pour from my cup. I only pour from my saucer. I pour from the overflow. The cup is mine. And I think there's an opportunity in listening to what you just said for us to understand what it looks like to fill our own cup first. And then to ask for others to pour into us when we can't do it on our own. I think there's so much shame. So let's talk about that for just a moment. How do we release or relinquish the shame, the shit show of shame that shows up around if I ask for help, if I show or illuminate a weakness, if I don't have it all figured out and I let something drop? How do we navigate through that? Because I feel like that's a big part of what's creating this amplification of a health crisis in mental health right now is this shame that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's suffocating people.
My goodness. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I love your saucer analogy. And two of the chapters of my book are one is about self-love, and that's your saucer analogy fits with that we need to pour into ourselves first and give with the extra, just like you said. And then the other piece, and the other chapter I was thinking of is about support. And when you said tribes, I had chills.
Mm.
And we are so missing that community, that tight, sort of interdependent um, relationships that support us and help us feel safe and connected. And so transcending support is something, in fact, in my next book, I just finished writing a chapter on support. It's about transcending those barriers. And the barriers are fear. Maybe we have been hurt in the past and we have difficulty trusting others, and it feels vulnerable and scary to ask for help. Or, like you said, maybe we have shame and we have irrational beliefs that asking for help is a sign of weakness. When, for example, in the Dames, we know that's a strength. I think of Megan Cantor, the founder, said to me, every time you're doing something at work, I want you to think about who can help you. And that was a real mindset shift for me because I hit horrible burnout when I was a young mom with a busy practice. I was taking care of my husband at the time, my kids, my clients, my employees, and ended up exhausted and depleted. And so that experience broke me open and taught me the importance of asking for support. And you're right, we need other people's energy to refill us. And that's a normal part of the human condition. And all of us is smarter than any one of us. So when we collaborate, we're going to make more informed decisions. I'm a big believer in having both a personal and professional board of advisors, those people that you really turn to for counsel, wise counsel when making life decisions. And that's a bit like having a tribe, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I love because I always tell people one plus when we are in that alignment and when we are connecting, one plus one becomes 20, 200, 2,000, 2,000,000. It's not one plus one is two. The other thing that's so fascinating about that, and this is where I want to come back to something else that you said before, because I think this is also playing into things right now. And you had offered that it's part of some of the anxiety right now is the AI piece. We are, in my opinion, and this is another one of my little, piece of candy sayings that I put out there, is that I feel like we are the most connected, disconnected culture ever. And that we have this energy right now where we complain and commiserate, we don't connect and communicate. And so when I think about, and I personally am a huge fan of AI, and Chat and I are besties right now, and so is Claude. I mean, I got a little board of advisors that's just my AI team, right? But I wonder or think about, in from your perspective and what you're seeing, where and how does AI play into this exhaustion, into the mental health crisis that's going on, and our ability to connect? Because I think we're missing something in terms of how we can utilize and leverage new technologies without further becoming the most connected, disconnected culture ever, because that energy is destroying our opportunity to come together like tribe. And we are not here to lead individually. We are here. First of all, leadership doesn't happen. I love it. It's kind of like Brene Brown. I don't know if you ever saw when someone said, I'm going to do vulnerability and I'm going to do it on my own. She's like, yeah,
It
that
doesn't
way.
work that way.
Right? Neither does leadership. Leadership doesn't work in a vacuum. And you got to lead yourself before you're leading anyone else, just for the record. And we can't create that next level of conscious, or we're going to really struggle moving into that next level of consciousness if we keep disintegrating that real connection that creates that energy of tribe. And so I'm curious, in your mind or what you're seeing, how that plays together.
Well, I think that with the rise of technology and AI, you're right. We've become more plugged in to our technology and more disconnected from ourselves and one another. And right now, AI is developing every day, every minute. And so we have to pace ourselves in terms of expectations around learning and adjustment. And I think also remember to unplug. to have those times where you have separation from your phone and your devices, and that you have a practice like meditation to go internal, and also that you connect with others in real life, in person, in real life, and not through devices, so that we have that feeling of belonging is so important. And I think as AI, what I believe and am seeing as I'm traveling across the country to different workplaces is that the role of humanity is going to become even more important, because all of the things that AI can do, it can do almost anything except be human. And so our roles and responsibilities are going to shift from, I hope, being a human doing, which I think we've been like that for a while, to being a human being. And again, that connection with compassion and ethics and morality and consciousness, so that we can use tools like AI for the greater good, remembering that it's our humanity and our connections to ourselves and others that is the true currency of life. I think love is the true currency of life.
Yeah, I agree with that so wholeheartedly. And so I'm curious for you, what do you think right now, in midst everything that's going on? Where is our biggest opportunity for humanity?
Wow, that's a big
Oh,
question.
I don't know why, but that just brought tears to my eyes. Oh, I can feel some energy between us. Oh, that just got big.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have a huge opportunity to see ourselves and others through empathy, and that's a much needed change. Instead of seeing differences and divide, to see likenesses and connection, and you know to be more open and inclusive, even though that's not the way the world is feeling right now. And I think a lot of hearts are breaking because of that. And so my hope is that this is some sort of necessary cleansing that we're going through. That's my belief, that that's the biggest opportunity, is for empathy and for us to work collaboratively.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's hard sometimes in our three-dimensional form to recognize the gift of what feels like the epitome of a shit show right now. There's a lot. The 5D me is like pull up the popcorn in the seat and be like, this is magically delicious. It's completely taking away all the stuff that doesn't work. And we're in the throes of it, right? And so I'm curious because the word that you said, again, sometimes I think things become kind of like business buzzwords or become the new flavor fad. I really want to understand it on a very fundamental level. When you say the word empathy, what is empathy really? And how do we demonstrate that in a way that's healthy and grounded? Because I think for a lot of people, it's the flavor of the month kind of, oh, we need empathy, but I'm not sure everybody really understands what that means. So, could you, from your perspective, define it and offer how we have an opportunity to actually put that in practice?
Empathy is the magic wand to successful relationships. It is the foundation of connection. It's the ability to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and imagine and understand how they feel. And there's cognitive empathy, which is like, oh, okay, I understand Candy's going through a lot right now and she's probably stressed. That's one level of empathy. And then there's emotional empathy, where it's like, oh, you know, Candy or so and so is going through such a time. I really feel for them. Like, for example, this might be a silly example, but one of my friends lost her dog yesterday, and I had a heavy heart for her. Like I feel it in my heart.
Not silly, by the way. I feel that, and I don't even know your friend. Anyone that loses an animal, that's like my heart. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel that in my body and in my soul. I feel empathy and compassion for her. And that's love. You know, when you're connected to someone, you feel what they're feeling. And transformative empathy is wanting to do something about it, you
Mm.
know? So that's where you are called to be of help. So, like, again, it might sound like a silly example, but calling her, texting her, checking in with her. And she said, "Oh my gosh, this means so much, you know?" And so it's not just a cerebral thing. And when I was, I was working full time as a therapist. I've retired from therapy. I speak about mental health and I do coaching, but I did 25 years of practicing as a therapist. And I feel like I completed that part of my journey. But I sometimes with my clients, if they were crying, I would tear up with them, like how you were when we were talking about that opportunity for humanity. Like those moments like that happen when we're really vulnerable with someone and we feel safe and connected. And I think we all have a human need to be known, loved, and understood. And empathy fulfills that need. And if we don't feel known or loved or understood, we feel depressed, anxious, unsafe, insecure, maybe angry. And sometimes we get louder until, in an attempt for people to hear. And so I think it is such an important skill in life, in parenting, in business, in politics. It should be, so it's a real opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I love the way that you define that and brought that into very practical examples, as well as the delineation in the fact that there are different types of empathy. Because I think about that even again, I'm going to bring back Brene Brown for just a second when she talks about vulnerability. There's a spectrum of vulnerability, right? Not everyone deserves or has earned access to your deepest, most vulnerable, wide open stories, especially if they're steeped in trauma and other things, right? And that's not
Yes.
to say you can't offer a level of vulnerability that allows for connection that's appropriate for the context and for the relationship that you're in. And I think about the way you just defined empathy as well. It's not that, because one of the things I know for me, and it's part of my wiring and my human design, is how can I'm an incredibly empathetic human being and I get very emotional. I mean, I'm the kid literally that cried at Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer when Rudolph, they wouldn't play with Rudolph, or when Frosty melted, or when in Home Alone, and my family makes a huge running joke that I'm the only person they know that cried twice in Home Alone. And I don't understand how my family didn't, because one is when Kevin realizes the only thing he wants for Christmas is his family. And two is when the granddaughter gets to hug her grandfather for the first time because how do you not cry? Anyway, that being said, is I've had to learn the other side of empathy, which is how can I have empathy without caring or feeling like I need to be the one that fixes, so that I'm not creating high functioning codependent and attachment cycles that have me carrying responsibility that's not mine.
Well said. Yeah. So you're like me, an empath, and sometimes we attract energy vampires. I think there's definitely like a empath narcissist
Yes.
attraction thing that happens. And yes, it can be so easy for us to step into that over caretaking, over functioning. And that leads to our own demise financially, emotionally, physically, et cetera. And so I'm a big believer in programs like Al-Anon that
Mhm.
help us set healthy boundaries. And that goes back to the saucer analogy, that we have to take care of ourselves first. It's just like when we're on an airplane, we need to secure the oxygen mask before assisting others. That's not selfish, it's essential.
Yes.
Otherwise, we have nothing left to give. And I'm going back to your comments about wealth. When we have more, we can help more.
Mhm.
And so it's not about materialism, greed, or excess. It's about welcoming prosperity so that we can make a difference in the world. And another little tangent, I think some of that is rooted in some religious teachings and a lot of that in Christianity, whereas in other religions, Judaism even, it's the relationship with money is different and it is spiritually rooted. But Hinduism, I love the goddess Lakshmi is the goddess of abundance, and she both has material wealth and also the lotus, like spiritual enlightenment. And that's what we're talking about, cultivating both.
Well, I love that because I look at one of my favorite things to study is the Tao. And the Tao talks about when I take care of me, all is taken care of. And it is that space of abundance breeds abundance. And the more that I allow the flow of life through me, the more things grow around me and whatever, right? And so you're right. There are dogmas and stigmas around that. It's interesting because the other thing that I want to tag on to that is something that I always say, because you talked about it's not selfish to put your oxygen mask on first. I'm going to offer, and I'm going to do a candy, like be very direct here. It's actually selfish when you don't. And I really want people to understand that we have, I think, in light of redefining wealth and success and how we show up and tapping into that abundance mindset that you talk about, it's also redefining this language around selfish. It is not selfish when I put myself first. It's selfish when I don't, because then when I give to people when I don't take care of me is the leftover crap. It's the residual sludge in a well that's drying out. And when we serve up the stuff that's gross and stinky and thick and nasty, and we go, here, I love you. How is that being of service? That's a cop out. And I think one of our biggest opportunities moving forward is to change that lens, to realize it's extremely arrogant and selfish when we don't take care of ourselves. Because if we don't make ourselves a priority, no one else will. And we can't possibly put into service our magic, our gifts. We can't do for our kids the way we want. We can't lead the way we want. How selfish is that to hold back the gifts that we were assigned as part of our soul contract and curriculum to put into the world at this moment on time? I don't know. I think it's I've had to really work with that because it was the big shift for me that got me out of some of those codependent cycles, that it was, wait a minute, it is not selfish to put me first. It is an absolute non-negotiable. It's selfish when I don't.
Mic drop, Candy. Mic drop. If you'll let me clip that and post that on
Please.
social media, you are on fire. And that is such a brilliant conception. And it's related to a thought I've had: when we live small, we're also being selfish.
Yes.
Some people think, I don't need a lot of wealth. I don't need this or that. I just want a simple life. It's like, well, yes, I understand that. And yes, having less stress and minimalism, all of that's great. But if you rise into your greatness, you expand your consciousness, you can shine the light, you can lift others up. And if you don't do that, you're not being of service to, you're robbing the world of your talents and gifts.
Right? I mean, 100,000% on that, how? And here's the thing, and it ties me back to the whole, there's this juxtaposition that we are in this space of fear, failure, fear, success. I'm going to offer, most people are not afraid of failure. Failure is easy and failure is a cop out. It's the success they're afraid of because with it comes greater responsibility. And it means I have to show up. It means I'm going to be a beacon of light, to go back to what you said at the very beginning around our opportunity to shine our light. But I love what you just said so much. I wish I could hug you right now because I love the fact that it is selfish for us to play small. It is selfish for you to shrink your light. It is selfish for you to hold back. And anything that someone keeps saying, you're to this, you're to that, that's your freaking gifts. Own it, stand into it, and wave your freak flag that says, look, if I'm too much for you, you're not my person, go find less.
Love it.
Because to your point, it is so incredibly fucking selfish for us not to stand in the freaking gifts that we came into this world. We are each a piece of the cosmic puzzle.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
We're so
I can't
like-minded.
activate my full gifts if you're not activating yours.
No, exactly. And when we choose relationships like ours, where we challenge each other and learn from each other and have these amazing conversations, that's how we raise consciousness.
Yeah. Because you don't surround yourself with yes people that say, oh, you're right. They say, hey, Candy, hey, Joyce. Ooh, that was out of line. That's not you playing. That's you hiding. That's you copping out. It's one of the reasons I do love the dames because you get the right power partners in there and they are very clear to hold your feet to the fire and be like, yeah, no, not that's a great because we've also gotten really good. We're in sales, we're speakers. I know I'm going to speak for myself, but my guess is I can probably gather that you're going to have some resonance with this. I'm really good at spinning the story about why I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. It's easy to cop out. So I know I want to, we could do this all day long and I'll probably have you back on another occasion. But I'm curious because you talked about you're writing a new book. What are you working on and how can people connect with you?
Thank you so much. I am working on this new book, so wish me luck. And related to what we were just talking about, I've basically gone after five very scary things that I've been procrastinating on. So applying for bigger, better opportunities. And what's scary is the rejection and, like you said, also stepping into that responsibility. And so anyway, that just resonated when you said that. So people can find me at joycemarter.com, JoyceMarter.com. I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. That's the platform that I'm most active on. And my book is called The Financial Mindset Fix. And I am a keynote speaker, corporate trainer, and coach, and happy to be of service. If anyone wants to direct message me, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. And we are going to put all her stuff in the show notes below and everything else. And I just, knew that this was going to get juicy today, knew that this was going to be so freaking delicious and powerful. And I just thank you so much for being here and being on the show. And like I said, I would absolutely love to have you back. I think there's so much more we could play in. So thank you, Joyce, so much for being here. And I'm curious if you had one nugget, one thing you'd like to leave people with in light of what we talked about today, what would it be?
To focus on self-compassion and empathy for others and just make that a daily practice. How can you be more loving to yourself and how can you be more loving to others?
Ooh, I love that so much. What a powerful question. Think about before you even step foot out of your bed, right? Before you put your face in any device or anything else, ask yourself that question. How may I be more loving to myself today? And how might I extend that love out to others? So, with that, again, thank you to my beautiful, badass, brilliant guest, Joyce Marter. She is just, like I told you, she's delicious. Love her energy. Love that you were here. And thank you all, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck podcast. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you are not already subscribing. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you all so much.